Your mind hasn't slowed down in days. Not in the way that matters. You've been moving through hours, the way you scroll through a feed. Fast. Already on to the next one, before the last one has registered. And you notice it sometimes. That faint sense that something is slipping past you, that life is happening, but your mind is always a half second ahead of it. Already in the next room, already calculating, already gone. You haven't been missing your life on purpose. You just can't slow your mind down long enough to be in it. You know that. You just don't know how to stop. Because there's something Buddhism understood a very long time ago, that most people will go their whole lives without realizing. A fast mind doesn't just feel exhausted. It actually sees less. That's what we're going to look at today. And you felt this, that particular kind of tiredness that rest alone cannot fix. You can rest for hours and still wake up with a mind that's already running, already building the day before the day has started, already solving problems that haven't happened yet, already anxious about conversations that exist only inside your head. That's not a rest problem. That's not even a stress problem. That's a mind that has never learned to be still. And the strange thing is, most of us never question that speed. We assume fast is better. We assume a busy mind is a sharp mind. We assume that the more thoughts we process, the more we'll get ahead. But here's the thing about a mind that never slows down. It stops being able to see what's actually in front of it. This is one of the clearest observations in early Buddhist teaching. When the mind is moving fast, it doesn't register more. It registers less, not because the world has less to offer, but because perception has a pace, and a pace that's too fast, passes right through experience, without absorbing any of it. You've seen this without knowing it. You've driven a route you've driven 100 times, and arrived at the destination with no memory of the journey. You've sat in a room with someone you care about, and your mind was somewhere else the entire time. You've eaten a meal and tasted nothing, because your thoughts were already in tomorrow. Your body was there, your mind was not. And that gap between being physically present and being mentally present, that's where your life is quietly disappearing. Not in some dramatic way, not in a way that feels like loss, just moment by moment. The texture of your experience goes thin. There's a word in Pali, the ancient language of the earliest Buddhist texts. It's called Sampajañña. It's often translated as clear comprehension, but that translation doesn't quite reach it. Clear comprehension isn't just awareness. It's the ability to fully receive what's happening as it's actually happening, not as a compressed version that your mind assembled at speed. Most of us are not experiencing our lives. We're experiencing our mind's version of our lives, a fast, already processed version of what's actually here. Cut down, filtered, pre-decided. Think about the last time you had a conversation that you were fully in, where the other person's words actually reached you, where you weren't already forming your response while they were still speaking, where you weren't thinking about how it was going while it was going. Those moments feel rare, but that's not because they're rare. That's because a mind moving at full speed processes a conversation the way you'd skim a document. It catches the main point. It misses the detail. It misses the feeling underneath the words. It misses the moment when something real was actually there. And you don't realize you missed it until later. Sometimes much later. Sometimes never. Buddha once said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." Most people hear that as inspiration. But look at it differently for a moment. Your mind isn't separate from your experience. It is your experience. The world you live in is filtered entirely through the speed and quality of your perception, which means when your mind moves too fast to see clearly, you're not living in a smaller world. You're living in a blurred one. And here's what that means for you. Every relationship you've built, through a mind that was partially elsewhere. Every decision you've made, while your attention was split in 3 directions. Every moment of potential peace, your mind immediately refilled with noise. This isn't a character flaw. This is the default setting of a mind that was never taught to slow down. And here's where it gets harder. The mind doesn't slow down on its own. It doesn't arrive at stillness because you've had a long week. It doesn't naturally decelerate. Left to itself, it accelerates. It finds more to think about, more to worry about, more to plan for. In Buddhist teaching, this tendency has a name. It's called Papañca, mental proliferation, the mind's compulsion to generate more thought out of the thought that's already there. You don't just have a worry. The worry generates a scenario. The scenario generates a feeling. The feeling generates a story about yourself. The story generates more worry, and you've been inside that cycle. Probably right now, some version of it is running in the background. The mind doesn't do this because it's broken. It does this because it was never shown a different pattern. And you know this feeling. You've been here before. That moment when you catch yourself. 3 thoughts removed from where you started, with no memory of how you got there. You were thinking about one small thing. Then somehow you were replaying a conversation from last year. Then somehow you were imagining a future that doesn't exist yet. That's Papañca, not a sign that something is wrong with you. A sign that the mind hasn't learned to stop. If this is landing for you, there's more of this on the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Now here's the part most people miss. When the mind is caught in Papañca, it isn't just uncomfortable. It's also creating a very specific filter over your entire experience. Everything you see gets processed through the emotional tone of where your mind already is. If your mind is running anxious loops, neutral things start to look threatening. If your mind is stuck in a past moment of difficulty, present moments that have nothing to do with it get colored by the same shade. It's not that the world has changed. It's that your mind's speed is now determining what the world looks like to you. And here's why that matters. Every time you respond to someone from that state, every time you make a decision from that filtered place, every time you interpret what's happening to you through the lens of a mind that hasn't slowed down enough to see clearly, you're not responding to life. You're responding to the version of life your accelerating mind has generated. And that's where misunderstanding comes from. That's where reactions replace responses. That's where you say something you don't mean or make a call you later regret. Not because you made a bad choice, but because you made a fast one from a mind that wasn't yet present enough to see the whole picture. This is one of the most practical things Buddhism offers. Not peace as a reward for getting everything right, but clarity is something that becomes available when the mind learns to slow down enough to actually see what's in front of it. Now consider what that actually looks like in a real day. You wake up and your mind is already making a list. The things that need to happen, the things that didn't happen yesterday, the conversation you have to have at some point, the problem that still hasn't resolved itself. And before you've been awake for 90 seconds, you've already left the room. Your body is in your bed, but your attention is already 3 hours from now, already there ahead of you, already trying to solve the day before the day has started. And the mind doesn't even pause to notice that. It doesn't flag this as unusual. Racing ahead of your own life has become so normal, it no longer registers as something happening. It's just what the mind does. You assume this is how minds work. You assume this is how everyone lives, but it isn't. And it doesn't have to be yours. And the day begins, not from where you are, but from where your mind already went. Each task carries the weight of the ones before it. Each conversation arrives already colored by the version your mind already ran through, the one that didn't go the way you wanted. By midday, you're not tired from the day. You're tired from running ahead of it. By evening, you're not empty because nothing happened. You're empty because your mind was somewhere else while it was happening. And none of this required anything dramatic. No crisis, no trauma. Just a mind moving too fast to be where it was. Here's what changes when the mind slows down. Not everything becomes easier. Not every problem disappears. But something shifts in the relationship between you and what you're dealing with. When your mind is fully in a moment, even a hard one, you have access to more information than usual. You see what's actually happening instead of what you fear is happening. You hear what's being said instead of what you assumed would be said. You feel what's actually present instead of what the loop in your mind has been generating. And from that place, the response that comes from you is more accurate, more settled, more true to who you actually are. Not because you became a different person, because you were actually there. That's the thing a fast mind costs you most. Not productivity, not efficiency, not forward motion, your own accuracy, your ability to see clearly enough, to respond to life as it is, not as your mind's speed has constructed it to be. Consider two people in the exact same difficult conversation. One is half somewhere else, already defending against something that hasn't happened yet, already in the aftermath, already calculating. The other is here, listening, receiving, not because they're less intelligent, but because their mind has slowed down enough to actually be inside what's happening. Which one sees more? Which one responds better? Which one leaves that conversation with an accurate picture of what actually occurred? This is what Buddhist teaching has been pointing toward for 2,500 years. Not a technique, not a practice for monks on mountains. A fundamentally different relationship between your mind and your experience. One where your mind is present enough to actually be useful. Present enough to actually serve you. Present enough to give you back the quality of perception you've been moving too fast to access. There's something the Buddha described that speaks to this exact pattern. Buddha said, "It is a man's own mind, not his enemy or foe, that lures him to evil ways. Not outside forces, not the demands of life. The mind's own speed, its own unchecked movement, pulling you somewhere you didn't decide to go." There's a practice in early Buddhist teaching called Sati. It's often translated as mindfulness, but that word has picked up a lot of associations that blur the original meaning. Sati is closer to this, remembering to come back, not arriving at stillness, not achieving stillness, returning to it again and again and again. Every time the mind accelerates, every time it runs ahead of you, every time you catch yourself 3 rooms away. From the moment you're actually in, Sati is the quiet act of coming back. Not with frustration, not with judgment, not with the sense that you failed because you left again. Just the simple act of returning to this breath, to this sound, to whatever is actually here right now. And here's what that requires practically. You don't have to change what you're thinking about. You don't have to resolve the thoughts before you can return. You don't have to finish the loop your mind is running before you're allowed to step out of it. At any moment, without preparation, without having done anything right, you can choose to be here. Not instead of your thoughts, not in opposition to your thoughts. Just here, aware of them, not pulled by them. This is the distinction most people miss. The mind that is slowed down isn't a mind without thought. It's a mind that has thoughts without being owned by them. And something is shifting in how you understand this. It's not about becoming quieter. It's about becoming more present inside the noise. Think about the difference between standing in a river and being carried by it. A mind that is never slowed down is always being carried. It ends up wherever the current takes it. It confuses movement with direction. It confuses speed with control. A mind that is practiced returning can stand in the river. It feels the water moving. It isn't pretending the water isn't there, but it has its feet on the ground. It chooses where to look. That's what slowing down actually means. Not the absence of current, the presence of ground. And here's where most people misread the whole thing. Most people think slowing down is about removing thought. It isn't. Most people think the goal is a quiet mind. It isn't. The goal is a mind that can be present within the motion of its own experience. A mind that can think without being swept away by thought. A mind that can feel without being pulled under by feeling. Buddha described it this way: if you are quiet enough, you will hear the flow of the universe. You will feel its rhythm. Go with this flow. Happiness lies ahead, not the removal of life, not stillness as escape. The ability to be inside life without being swept away by it. Now here's what nobody tells you about this. The first time your mind actually slows down, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels like discomfort, because a mind that has been running at full speed for years doesn't know what to do with stillness. It interprets stillness as danger, as falling behind, as missing something critical. And so the mind does what it knows. It accelerates. It fills the space immediately. It finds something urgent that needs your attention right now. This is normal. This is expected. This isn't failure. This is the mind showing you exactly how deep the pattern runs. And here's what that means for the practice. You're not working to achieve stillness. You're working to change the mind's relationship to it. To teach the mind through repetition, through patient return, that stillness isn't loss. That slowing down doesn't mean missing life. That coming back to this moment doesn't mean letting go of what matters. It means actually arriving at what matters for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a long time. There's something that happens when the mind genuinely slows. Not immediately, not in the first few attempts, but over time, when the practice of returning becomes familiar, something becomes visible that was there the whole time. A space between thoughts, small at first, maybe barely perceptible, just a fraction of a second, where the next thought hasn't yet arrived, where the previous one has already passed, where there is just, briefly, the experience of being here. That space is not nothing. That space is where you actually see, not your mind's version of what's happening, not the filtered, already processed version. The thing itself, the way someone's voice sounds when they're actually being heard, the way a morning looks when you're fully in it, the way your own body feels when you're not running ahead of it. These things don't require extraordinary circumstances. They don't require a retreat or a transformation. They only require a mind that is slowed down enough to receive them. And the accumulation of those moments adds up to something you wouldn't have predicted. Not enlightenment, not an absence of difficulty, not a life without its complications, just a life that feels like something, that has weight, that registers, that you're actually living rather than always running to catch up to it. And over time you'll find that the gap between who you've been and who you are when you're fully present begins to close. Not through effort alone, through the simple, repeated act of coming back. Each return is a small signal to the mind. You can stop. You don't have to keep moving. What's here is enough. What's here is worth arriving at. And the mind slowly begins to trust that. Not all at once, but gradually the resistance softens. The acceleration slows. The space between thoughts grows from a fraction of a second to something you can actually stand in. And that's where the mind starts to see more. Not less, more. The detail it was skipping over at speed. The texture it was compressing into impressions. the quiet that was always underneath, the noise of its own making. And here's what that means for the way you move through a day. You're not slower in the ways that matter. You're not less capable. You're not falling behind. You're simply arriving at your life instead of perpetually running ahead of it. The emails still get answered. The problems still get solved. The responsibilities still get carried. But you're actually inside of them instead of watching them from a mind that left the room before they started. And the people in your life begin to feel something different. Not because you became someone else, because you became more present. Because when they speak, you're actually there. When something matters, your mind doesn't immediately rush past it toward the next calculation. You land, you arrive. You stay long enough to actually be somewhere. And it turns out that's all any moment was ever asking from you. Not more speed, not more output, not more optimization, just your presence. The quality of a mind that has learned to slow down enough to actually be here. And that's the thing about all of this. The mind that slows down doesn't fall behind. It catches what the fast mind was moving too quickly to hold. The texture of a moment, the weight of a conversation, the quiet that lives underneath everything. Always. Not waiting for you to earn it, just waiting for your mind to stop running past it. A fast mind misses its own life, not out of carelessness, not out of indifference, out of the simple fact that it never stopped long enough to realize it was missing anything. You've been moving fast for a long time. You know what it cost, even if you haven't named it. That faint hollowness, that sense that the day was full but somehow empty, that exhaustion that rest doesn't solve. This isn't how it has to stay. Buddhism doesn't offer an escape from the speed. It offers something better. The discovery that beneath the speed, beneath the noise, beneath the Papañca and the planning and the racing forward, there is something that was never missing. Your life, right here, in exactly the moment you're in right now. Not the version coming next. Not the version you're still processing from before. This one. And the practice is simple. Not easy, but simple. Every time you notice the mind is left, come back. Not with effort, not with frustration, just with the quiet act of returning to this breath, to this moment, to the texture of what's actually here. And if you do that again and again, without expecting a result, without measuring progress, without judging the speed of the mind's return, something will change. Not your circumstances, not your responsibilities, not the speed of the world, but the quality of your experience inside it. That's what a mind that has learned to slow down delivers. Not answers, not solutions, not clarity about what to do next. Just the simple, radical discovery that being here is enough, that the moment you're in is not a problem to be solved. It is the whole thing, and you don't have to do anything with that. You just have to let your mind slow down enough to finally see it. This channel exists to help you understand what's actually happening inside your mind. If that's what you're looking for, subscribe.